What's going on, everybody? We are back and live once again. It's another great episode of Liam Picks Fights, and today we have a very special card to break down for you. It's UFC 274. It's going to be headlined by a lightweight championship fight between Charles Oliveira and Justin the Highlight Gaethje. Should be a tremendous fight card. It's filled top to bottom with recognizable UFC names, albeit some of them a little past their sell-by date, but we still have great fights to break down. I have an insanely great guest that we've been trying to bring on for quite some time. So excited to talk to Mike's MMA picks today about these great fights. But the last piece of housekeeping we got to get out of the way is that this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. All my content is, and PrizePicks is the simplest game in DFS. All you got to do is go to prizepicks.com. You make your first deposit. You use my promo code Liam. They're going to deposit match you 100% up to $100. And then you pick 2 to 5 props. You put them together. All you're doing is playing against their projections. So they put up projections for things like takedowns, significant strikes, fight time, things that we're already betting on. So if you have a strong opinion, if you want to put 1 or 2 of them together, you could do that. If you want to play across different sports, PrizePicks has all different offerings. So go check out what they have on offer. If you're looking for more information, it's in the description box below. And with that being said, guys, without further ado, let me bring in my guest today. Mike, how are you doing, my friend? It's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on the show.
Ditto, Liam. Excited to be here for a phenomenal card in Phoenix. Looking forward to this one. You know, you bring up a great point. We talk about the expiration date on some of these fighters, though. When we take a deeper look at that, we understand that we have a number of fighters who are legends, right? And how do you become a legend? You do that by paying your dues, and that's key here too. So a lot of people earn their spot on this card, and I am looking forward to it and looking forward to breaking this down with you, Liam. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. And shout out to my man who I see already in the chat. Z's MMA says this will be good. Shout out to Z's MMA.
Hey!
Shout out to the odds mug matching today for me and Mike. So big shout out to our man. Big shout out to everybody who is filing in. My man Gramps, Glenn Bot, Philip V, Gordo, Gary, Claudio, lots of familiar names. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, get subscribed to the channel, all the things that will help me keep putting out great content like this on a weekly basis. So with all that being said, we got 15 fights to break down, so we have no time to waste. We could start here at the very bottom of the card. A fight that, you know, on first glance, I was ready to pass on just because neither one of these guys is very promising on paper, but the more I looked into the matchup, the more I understand why people are starting to crowd in on the underdog price here. And the reason being is as follows. You know, the things that have taken down Journey Newson so far in the UFC have been left side head kicks. You know, he's been blasted with a couple of head kicks by very large bantamweights. And I think that that is something that, you know, is probably not going to happen here. You know, he's got a very boxing centric fighter that's going to be standing in front of him. But with that being said, you know, he has been clipped on the chin. He can be hurt. We've seen that. So there is some finishing upside, but we really haven't seen a ton of power on the other side here. You know, last fight, he gets a finish, a knockout win in the first round. Maybe that will encourage some people into thinking that this guy's got devastating power. But then you look through and really he's gone to split decision like 5 times pro and amateur. And on top of that, you know, he's got a good record in decisions, but a lot of them are playing out close. His only loss is a split decision as well. He's just fighting within the margins a lot of the time. A lot of blood and guts brawls. He relies on his durability a lot, I think. And that might get tested against somebody like Journey Newson, who's got pretty decent power in his own right. He's got a high knockdown rate on the strikes that he has landed in the UFC, albeit not many of them. So I think the guy does carry power, especially that right-hand counter. I think if he lands that here, it could be a problem for a guy who's pretty green and making his UFC debut. But also, I don't think the UFC is trying to promote somebody like Journey Newson. I think they're trying to, you know, find winnable fights for their, you know, emerging prospects. We've got a younger guy here on the Garcia side. So for me, this was a pass fight, potential underdog, if anything, but overall, I didn't love what I saw from the favorite. And I did think that I backed him on Contender Series, but I had a feeling I would be looking to fade him at some point in the UFC. How do you feel, Mike?
That right hand of Journey Newson is a real threat. And the key here is going to be Fernie Garcia. If this turns to an all-out brawl, then we might be seeing some fireworks there. Another thing, you brought up a great point as far as long fighters, the Costa situation. You looked like Zohan was flying in there with one of his feet. And in this spot, I look at Newson, reminds me of a giant John Dodson out there, the way he's able to quickly move in and out, unpredictable in many regards, but also he's been caught. He's no spring chicken either. I believe he's 33 years of age, so he's put some time in the game, also some time on the mat too. Black belt. Fernie Garcia apparently has a background in wrestling. I've seen a lot of stand-up, looking to trade in the pocket. Should be an interesting fight. I'm slightly leaning to the underdog here. I want to see how Garcia performs under the bright lights. I'm very hesitant to back a contender series fighter who's coming in with that shine. Everybody watches, and under the bright lights, first time out. We're going to talk about another fighter later on where octagon jitters are real, and we need to cap that into our process here. So I'm going to be leaning towards the underdog. I haven't made a play on it, and Newson will be my pick.
I'm glad we're seeing eye to eye on that one. And I think that there's a lot of potential value to be had. I think that we have seen, like you mentioned, a lot of systemic underperformance from people in their UFC debut, even people that go on to be very successful later on in their UFC career. So I think that this is a potential underperformance spot for Fernie Garcia. We saw it open at a higher price. The action's been fairly one way, it looks like, based on line movement. So I think Fernie Garcia is ultimately not going to end up being a heavy favorite by close of fight time. I think this line will continue to shrink up until fight time. So with that being said, we can move on to a fight in the 115-pound division. We got Lupita Godinez performed much better at the strawweight class than she did at the flyweight class, taking on Ariane Carnelossi here. And she had a really wild brawl. I believe it was the curtain jerker for a UFC event, and went to war with Na Liang. And for me, that's not an inspiring performance, albeit she is a very physical woman in this division. I think that's always going to be something people have to contend with. I don't think she has poor cardio, despite the fact that she has big musculature. But I do think Lupi Godinez is probably a superior technical wrestler. Her family is part of the Canadian wrestling national circuit. I think that she gets better training rounds in terms of her pure wrestling. And we've seen her put that performance to use multiple times now in the UFC. And I think that it was the length and the size of her opponent when she moved up to 125 and couldn't get the takedowns against Luana Carolina. I think that was what was causing her problems, because she likes to be a lower body takedown artist, and she was having a hard time elevating the lower body because she couldn't really get underneath the hip. So I think that that's something that we could see differently in this fight, where she could use chain takedowns to get on top of Carnelossi. But overall, I did not get involved in this fight from a betting perspective. I would prefer the Lupi side. I'd have to lay some chalk to get there. So kind of waiting to see what happens. I've seen a lot of love on Carnelossi, and the price has continued to come down a bit. So potentially we'll get involved if the price drops enough. But right now I'm comfortable passing on this fight. How do you feel, Mike?
Yeah, it's interesting. Wonder how many gun shows Carnelossi has won throughout the years. She, all of that extra muscularity is a cause for concern, especially now that she's up against a competent striker in Lupita Godinez. I watch Carnelossi close the distance. She throws hooks and she leaves her chin wide open. This is a situation where I see Godinez, although she hasn't had many finishes via strikes on her resume, she packs a powerful punch, is comfortable in the pocket, and can land counter shots. And I think that is something we're going to see. A cause for concern if you're on the Godinez, if you're on the Carnelossi side, you have the wrestling, the strength, the pure strength of Godinez. I've seen her in the training room videos that have made their way onto the internet. She's a pretty strong gal. Both of these ladies are extremely strong. I think that may cancel each other out here. Carnelossi apparently has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so that's something to look out for. I think that fight is going to be canceled out on the mat, and they're going to end up trading on the feet. Godinez is a more competent striker. And one thing I'll say also, as far as trusting or failure to trust low level mixed martial arts, this is not necessarily low level mixed martial arts. This is a few notches above Mazzani last week. So I'd be more apt to back Godinez in this spot because she's proven what she's capable of. She's although the Penne fight was something that was a head scratcher, her debut, I like Godinez in this spot, and I think that the longer this fight goes, we should see a cardio edge as well as the striking edge, and also the Mexican blood. The Phoenix crowd is going to be backing her. I know it's the second fight of the night, but there should be a pop here. And we talk about fights where the crowd does make an impact. Look at last week in the Andrei Arlovsky Jake Collier fight, and how the Apex was packed with Arlovsky fans. Yes, I know, disgraceful judging, but what are you going to do? So I'm going to be picking Godinez in this spot. I think that it'll be interesting as the fight gets closer to fight night after weigh-ins. People are going to see the physique of Carnelossi, and they may be sucked into that because, let's be honest, Liam, a lot of ladies' fights are won via physicality and aggression. So it may come down to that, but I'm going to be leaning Godinez.
I think, moreover, we have an example of Lupi losing a fight due to physicality, so to speak, but it was physicality, like I mentioned, of a different kind. Height is a different factor to deal with than strength. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Lupi is extremely physical. I thought the Panay fight was wrongly scored. I thought that Lupi won that fight. But either way, she fought within the margins, UFC debut, maybe jitters. We've seen examples of underperformance. She was power bombing her like it was a WWE match. She had her up over her head and threw her across the octagon. It's like her strength is not to be trifled with at all. And so I think if you combine technique with the strength and physicality
and the cardio to boot,
absolutely, it could be several paths for her here, whether that's on the ground or if you like you think. I think she's also superior on the feet.
right.
We've seen examples of her busting up Vanessa Demopoulos for 5 full rounds regionally. Yes.
And one other thing I wanted to mention, we didn't mention the Luke Bunmi fight and how Godinez held her own in that fight on the feet and was landing some of the better punches in the exchanges. So I think that Godinez is the side here, and it's interesting. I've seen a lot of people that played Godinez in the minus 200-ish range. Now, I wouldn't go out of my way to do that, especially considering you're laying chalk in a women's MMA fight. There's another fighter way down the card there that we'll discuss later on in the evening, but my take is that Godinez is the side.
I'm with you. So with that being said, we can move along to the next fight on the card, where we do have a very wide line here. And we've got Clayton Rodriguez, somebody that I was fairly impressed with on the Contender Series, but not minus 300 in a UFC debut impressed with. And he's taking on CJ Vergara, who I can admit I wasn't all that impressed with from his Contender Series run. But I thought his UFC debut left some reason for potential optimism. I thought he stuck around in a fight where he was clearly losing, and he was able to come back a little bit in that third round. But broadly speaking, I think that spoke to the cardio of Ode Osborne a little bit. I think that Clayton should be able to evade most of the big attacks here from Vergara, which are a little bit predictable. And I think that Clayton's just a little bit sharper, but I think he's giving up a little bit in reach here. That's something that I don't love betting into when I'm also betting in to a huge chalk price. So for me, it was a pass spot. There's a lot of fights on the card. Big favorite that I think is going to win. For me, it was just a pass. How do you feel, Mike?
Clayton, he looks the part. His distance management is fantastic. In his Contender Series bout, he went the full 3 rounds, and you got to see some of the talent at play. Granted, after the fight, I don't know if you caught his post-fight interview where he said he has many more tools that he wasn't able to show. And he was in there against a wrestler, right, who was much shorter, looked like he could have fought at like an atom weight. It was incredible, the size difference inside of the octagon. So I'll be interested to see what both fighters look like at weigh-ins. The Ode Osborne fight, that got a little sketchy in the 3rd round, right? So in this spot, you got to wonder, I think Rodriguez's cardio is going to hold up here. he had so much left in the tank at the end of that Contender Series fight, and he got grounded, was able to get up with ease. And you look at the regional footage as well, and the kid is talented. There's no denying that. As far as me playing a minus 350 or higher, I'm not going to go out of my way to do that in the debut fight. Vergara, he's a regional fighter as far as I'm concerned. I think he may be getting the boot after this bout, but we'll see. We'll see. The question is, does this fight end inside the distance? What's your take on that? Sitting at minus 125 at most books.
That's interesting. You know, I would think probably more often than not, this does end inside the distance. But again, one of the things that has trapped me in the past and that I'm trying to avoid is betting fights not to go at flyweight, just because, you know, even in fights where they're fighting at a frenetic pace, guys land a ton of shots. Sometimes it doesn't get there. You know, they land a high volume, but nobody goes down. And there is a decent finishing rate at flyweight. It's not like there isn't finishes to be had. But they tend to come more from a submission perspective. I actually had, peaked at the submission prop on Clayton Rodriguez, but it's only like 4.5 to 1. So it's not very appealing to me. I think I'll probably end up passing on the fight broadly, but yeah, I think there could be something to be had on the fight not to go.
Yeah. Sometimes you feel like you're threading a needle to have something like that cash in this spot. Yeah. Vergara has some durability. He's hung late in fights as well. That's what he's known for. So I'll be passing. Thank you, Z.
There with the data points. Appreciate you, my man. So with that being said, we can move along to a fight in the women's 125-pound division. And this is going to be one where I have a bet. So I'm going to kick this one to you first, Mike.
Wow.
We got Tracy Cortez taking on Melissa Gatto at women's flyweight here. And two hot young prospects in the division. As far as the matchmakers are concerned, 2 draws on the record of Melissa Gatto, but no losses. And then Tracy Cortez, I believe it was a submission loss in her very first fight and hasn't lost since. So we've seen, she's gone to a couple split decisions. She's had a couple fights within the margins, but broadly speaking, Tracy Cortez has gotten a lot of wins. So she's priced here as the favorite. How do you feel about this fight?
Interesting. Cortez, local fighter, fight ready, right? Should have the crowd behind her. It's a matter of if she's able to land takedowns consistently and kill time in burn time in top position. How long can she do that for? Gatto, I was very impressed with her win over Eubanks last time out. Very, very impressed. The cardio was there. The ferocity was there. The pace was there. And Cortez, let's be honest, she is a fish out of water on the feet. And I think that may potentially come back to haunt her here. It's interesting. My take is if Cortez is able to establish and be positionally sound here, that she may bank enough time to win rounds, but Gatto should get the much better of the stand-up exchange. And I know we have to worry about a submission threat on the bottom from Gatto as well, too. So it's a tough fight to call. I'm going to be slightly leaning towards the underdog here. I think that Gatto is live, still only 26 years of age. The sky's the limit. The way she was able to defeat Carol Rosa as well taught me a lot about her and what she's capable of. So it's not like she's going to just rest on her back. She's going to be working the entire time. So give me Gatto here. How about what's your take here?
Cheers to that is what I say, because I am on the Gatto side here. And that is where I put down a bet. And I hit the early numbers here. I'm on plus 155, plus 145. And I ended up tracking it at plus 140 because that was the best available. I hit it at my local casino as well. But as far as I'm concerned, Melissa Gatto is live in this spot because she's the more dangerous fighter, and you've got Tracy Cortez, who is a very talented control style grappler, let's say, in some ways, right? That's what she's been able to push as her advantage so far in fights. And even against some pretty talented grapplers, a young Erin Blanchfield, for example, she was able to get some top time. She was able to control some of the fight. So I think that Tracy Cortez at her best is like a top player. But then I go back and I look at her fights, and her volume is extremely low. From the top position, from standing at distance, she just doesn't throw with a tremendous amount of volume. She doesn't do a lot of damage. Not a very dangerous fighter, broadly speaking. You know, she might lock a choke up. She might be able to put you in a submission hold because she gets dominant positions. But outside of that, you know, she's not really the most scary person to fight. Melissa Gatto's a scary person to fight. You know, she kicked Sijara Eubanks and crumpled her, put her down. I do think Sijara was starting to tire, but I think that shows, you know, that this girl is a very dangerous striker. On top of that, we see her getting sweeps regionally, as well as in the UFC. We see that she has been able to handle people accordingly when they're not of her level, and put them away. So I think that there's a lot of things to like about her. I think that her ground game is dangerous. You know, I think she could have broke Carol Rosa's arm if she didn't tap. You know, she had really good position on that Kimura as well. So I think she's going to have multiple paths to win this fight. You know, it might be one of those cases where she's losing right up until she's winning. Which I do think is sometimes concerning, but that's why she's an underdog, and that's why I'm willing to back her at this price. You know, I think she's going to fight for my money. I think she's going to be dangerous throughout, and I think that, you know, hindsight 2020, I think she might be the better prospect. She's younger. She looks, you know, physically like a different class of athlete, in my opinion. So I think that there's a lot to like here, and I'm excited about her potential in the division.
And Brian Ortega can't get into the octagon and fight for Cortez. So
No, he cannot. No, he cannot. But with that being said, we do have a fight in the 170-pound division here, between Andre Fialho. Kind of a weird matchmaking because they booked this on very short notice. And then he's going to be taking on Cameron Van Camp. And I got to say, I wasn't very impressed by Cameron Van Camp, with all due respect, when I started looking into the tape. You know, he looks like a guy who can dominate a regional scene with his top pressure. You know, he's got that front headlock game. You know, a man after my own heart. He's going for the guillotine every 2 seconds. So I like a lot of what I saw, but I do think that it's kind of got, you know, a capped ceiling. And we've seen that even in some fights where he was able to get some grappling positions, he starts to tire out. You know, early on, he got knocked out in brutal fashion, face down. I was able to find tape of that fight. You know, not a very good look there. Some questions about the durability. He's been finished more than once. And when you got a guy like Fialho, you know, I kind of regret that I didn't bet Fialho in his last fight, because I bet on him in his first fight and I thought he looked live, but I was like, you know what? The price has calmed down. You know, people have smartened up to it. Maybe I just let this one go by. And then, of course, you know, that's when he gets the stunning knockout. So I think that Fialho is probably being set up here to get another knockout. You know, the UFC wants to promote this guy as far as I'm concerned. He's been given a couple high-profile matchups. He came over with some UFC credible wins under his belt already. The things that are dangerous here is the fact that it's a really quick turnaround. You know, we've seen a lot of guys lose fights on these quick turnarounds, including Lupe Godinez. You know, she took that really quick turnaround fight. I think it was like
7 days.
7 days. Yeah. And just probably a mistake in hindsight. This is a little bit more time. I think it should be sufficient for Fialho. And as long as he doesn't, you know, have like a heart attack or something in the second round, I think that he should be able to win and probably finish the fight in the early going. I think he's just levels above him. How do you feel?
Yeah. I echo your sentiment here. You watch the footage on Van Camp, and the guy apparently is a glorified can crusher. He has 9 submission victories to his credit, fights out of a solid gym with Chris Lytle, right? So by the way, oh man, I was at the Chris Lytle, Thiago Alves fight back in the day that got stuffed via cut. I still wanted to see that come to a head, because Chris Lytle was mounting a tremendous comeback in that spot, and we never got to see it. But in this specific instance, Fialho is the much more polished fighter, comfortable in the pocket, has cardio. We've seen him go deep in fights, is very, very dangerous. The way he was able to put it on Baeza and turn the fight on a dime. Baeza was starting to light him up early, quick. And I don't see his opponent here having any significant success for any length of time. He's going to have to go for broke here. But Fialho should take his time and pick his spots, and then eventually end this fight via KO. And I'm waiting for props to come out on this one. It looks like it still hasn't arrived at many books. So I'm going to be picking Fialho, and I believe he gets this done inside the distance.
I'm going to go ahead and agree with you there. And I got to shout out Random in the chat says Mike is must-see TV. And this is exactly why. UFC historian here. What a callback. So yeah, I noticed that as well, that he was training with Chris Lytle, but I did notice it seemed like a lack of, other substantive training partners at that gym. So yeah, there was for me a bunch of red flags on the Van Camp side, especially those regional losses inside the distance. Normally that does not translate beautifully to the UFC, especially with a guy as dangerous as Fialho. And several UFC vets have felt the power of Fialho. And, the guys that he lost to regionally are having success now in the UFC. I think people underestimated how good somebody like Chris Curtis was coming into the UFC, and he's delivered some big results. So, now his beating up of Fialho doesn't look as bad. I think it's aged, considerably well, whereas some other people, they lose a fight and it doesn't age well. So Stefan Sekulic, another guy, tried to bring some wrestling pressure. As soon as he got a break in the action, a separation, hit him with an elbow that was absolutely devastating. So I think this guy can create power in short bursts. And I think that, unders, Fialho inside the distance, those are some of the things I'm going to be looking at myself. So haven't played anything there. Like Mike mentioned, this is one of the ones that the books have been really slow to put lines up for, because it's a late announcement, because they probably are trying to shade everything, towards Fialho justifiably here. So with that being said, we can move on to another fight where I will be taking some betting action, almost reluctantly, but heavyweight fights have been something I've been trying to target a lot more this year. Been doing a decent job making money, looking towards underdogs in the heavyweight division. And, I think that this is certainly going to be an uphill battle for my guy, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, because he's got a very durable, tough guy in Blagoy Ivanov in front of him. But I keep hearing about how tough and durable Blagoy Ivanov is. And I think it was my man Z who often talks about, if a fighter has a rock solid chin, it's because you've seen them get hit in the face over and over and over. And this guy gets lit up in most of his fights. He does not have great hand speed. He's not very fast. He's not very fleet of foot. But what Blagoy Ivanov has is good counter boxing. He's pretty sharp on the counter at times. He's got good staying power, good durability. Those are good traits to have at heavyweight, certainly. He's going to be the slightly younger guy in this spot. I think he's going to have Rogerio covered a little bit from a cardio and from a grappling perspective. However, I've seen improvements over time from Marcos Rogerio de Lima. And I do think that he has some ability to control minutes on top of people because he's so big and physical at heavyweight. He comes in right around that heavyweight limit. I also believe that was against lower level guys. So in this fight, what's he going to be looking to do? I mean, his primary game plan is to beat people up on the feet, and he throws a high volume of leg kicks, which Blagoy Ivanov does not really do. He's more of a boxer primarily. So I think that leg kicks are a potential path to hurting and limiting the mobility of somebody like Blagoy. And Blagoy, a lot of his fights, spends a little bit of time edging away, running away from somebody as they start to unload in volume strikes. And if you can beat up the legs early, you can unload in combinations, and it's going to be a lot harder to evade. So I think that Rogerio de Lima early is very live to win this fight. I think that he's got big power. So I'm going to be on the underdog here. How do you feel about this one?
Excellent observations, Liam. I agree in a lot of respects. I think that what Ivanov, the way he fights, it's steady as he goes. Doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Same as our MMA handicapping, right? We never freak out and act like a fool after we win, and we never put our heads in our hands and cry when we lose. So what I like about Blagoy here is that he has proven that he's a durable fighter. He's been in there with some very heavy hitters, and he's going to have to take some from Marcos Rogerio de Lima here before he ends up giving something back. I don't see him being the aggressor in this fight. I think that could hurt him, actually, if he ends up being the aggressor in this fight, because de Lima, I mean, the Rothball fight, what can you say about it? Ben's kind of washed and on his way out, but I've seen de Lima win. I've actually seen him have success on the ground too. It's few and far between, but it's there. And he fights out of a decent camp out of ATT, right? Interesting spot here. I'm leaning to Blagoy to survive an initial onslaught here and turn the tide about end of the first round. I think we're going to see De Lima start to run out of gas. And I'm going to be looking at the third round props for Ivanov here in this spot. I think that it's a worthy poke, but I wouldn't go out of my way to track something that is that has a low percentage of hitting. That I when I track my plays, I try to make plays that I truly believe in, that something is going to hit. And I think that you look what has to happen here, and Marcos Rogerio de Lima is going to have to fade. I think that's going to have to happen here before Ivanov turns up. What's your take on that?
I would tend to agree. And I do think that that's certainly a viable path. It's like, how have guys beaten Marcos Rogerio de Lima? They survive an onslaught, because he normally brings the pressure, even to guys that he's lost to, the Stefan Struves of the world. He absolutely lit that guy on fire, but couldn't get him out of there, which was shocking to me at the time. And then he ends up getting finished. So his ground game is certainly suspect. I believe he's labeled as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, which is funny. But it's also fatigue makes cowards of us all. We've seen elite black belts get submitted by, guys much further below them on the jiu-jitsu food chain when they're exhausted. So
Hernandez,
fatigue can definitely be a factor.
Yeah. Interesting spot. I'm not going to go out of my way to make a play specifically on this fight, but I understand why folks are leaning towards the Ivanov late stoppage.
I like it. And shout out to my man Z, says fight doesn't go, minus 155 is how he's looking. And De Lima KO2 plus 900.
Oh, well.
I think that all interesting props there.
9-1. Hey.
Yeah, I was looking at De Lima KO1 at 9-1 and also saying, that is basically how he wins most of his fights, except like the Maurice Green, lay on top of him. Also, shout out to my man Tim, a very sharp, prop round better as well. Ivanov round 2 plus 850, round 3 plus 1200, sub 2 and 3, 13-1. So yeah,
one other thing, Liam, I wanted to mention how Marcos Rogerio de Lima seems to be a fighter who carries his confidence into fights. He's somebody who, if things aren't going well for him, you've seen him check out like that. But if he comes into a fight with a multiple fight win streak, he may believe in himself more than in previous bouts. So he might be less apt to quit. Just something to consider.
We actually saw some signs of improvement, I would say, in terms of the resistance he offered Romanov. There were times when if he had even been like half a breeze taken down, he's like, all right, see ya. And he's tapping before you put him in something. Whereas I did think he offered resistance. They tried to get back to his feet. He does have good coaching staff. So I think they're working with him on these skills. It's just, he's already 36 years of age. How many new skills is he going to learn? Probably not a ton, but I think we're going to see small incremental improvements. The heavyweight division is one of the divisions where you could still see guys improving. And so we might even see an improved product from Blagoy here. But I also think, cage rust and big power can be a really bad combination. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping for here. But for sure, Blagoy has a clear path to take over, and he's the more reliable and more durable guy. I just think that, there's been a lot of sleeping on Marcos Rogerio de Lima, myself included. And so if he wins this fight here, he's probably going to be priced a favorite in his next fight and unplayable for me. So I'm going to take the poke here and walk the plank with Marcos Rogerio de Lima. With that being said, we can move to a flyweight fight where I won't be, walking the plank with either one of these guys. We got Brandon Royval on the one hand. He's taking on Matt Schnell. And Matt Schnell, in terms of your process, I would assume is an unbettable fighter because, if you want to feel really confident that somebody's going to win, Matt Schnell will always give you these sweaty moments where he puts his chin on the line. He's willing to brawl at times. He's willing to get into pocket boxing exchanges, and he doesn't have a very good chin. And so if that's the case, it's always going to be a little bit concerning to back him, especially if he's a chalk price. Now, he's priced here as a plus 210 underdog. They're not giving him a great chance to win the fight. So it becomes a little more interesting to look at the Schnell side then, because he does have competent jiu-jitsu. He's no slouch on the ground. He's shown that he has a good guard game, especially. I don't think either one of these guys has an exceptional wrestling game. So I find it hard to imagine who's going to get on top. I could see frenetic scrambles where either one of these guys gets on top of the other one. So for me, that's a reason to not back Brandon Royval. He's not very heavy-handed, in my opinion. We see a good volume of strikes from him. He could potentially overwhelm him with cardio and volume. He does have unorthodox attacks. He jumps with knees and spinning elbows. He does, a wide variety of strikes. So maybe he catches him with an errant strike, and we know the chin is exposed and not very good. But I do have a feeling that this fight might go over. I do have a feeling that this fight might see the scorecards. I think it's possible either one of these guys could finish. For me, it's a high variance fight, a fight between two guys that I don't really feel like backing at the prices. If I had a wider line on Schnell, I could potentially get interested. But for me, I'm just going to pass here. I think Royval probably wins the fight. He's a little bit more durable, a little bit more activity overall, but I don't think that, I'm very confident in that play.
Okay. Well, I see things a little differently. In this specific spot, you have to wonder also, Matt Schnell, is he going to show up to the fight? Is he going to accept the fight? I don't know if you remember, but last time out, Alex Perez showed up 2 pounds overweight, and Matt Schnell didn't accept the fight. They also previously tried to fight, and Schnell didn't clear his medicals. So those are 2 red flags. The fight was booked 3 separate times with Alex Perez, and Schnell never made it to the scale. Never made it to the fight and didn't accept the fight. So what I see out of Matt Schnell, he has great footwork. He has quickness. He's willing to trade on his terms, and he likes to touch and go. And what Brandon Royval is great at is excelling in the chaos. He wants a war. He wants his opponent to make his mistake so that he can capitalize on it. You watch the Banter fight. Royval was taken down 8 times in that fight, yet still managed to come back and win. And one thing I love about Brandon Royval's game is his ability not to accept position. He will work and fight tooth and nail to get out of any spot. He'll give up his back in a heartbeat to transition out of it. The Kai Kara France fight was something that taught me a lot about him. The Tim Elliott fight taught me a lot about Brandon Royval. Even the Moreno loss taught me about him. One of my biggest plays of the year last year was Pantoja over Royval. But I'll tell you this, and I'll admit this, that the tide was turning in that fight. Brandon Royval was about to take over, and Pantoja had to work to sink in that choke. And if it was a few more seconds, another minute or so, I think Royval would have became live and had a real shot at winning that fight. And in this spot, if you've taken the time to listen to Brandon Royval's interviews, he's a man of his word. What he said prior to the Banter fight was that he was going to be more cerebral, not let himself get into these firefights. And this time around, he says he welcomes the firefight. He wants chaos to ensue because he knows that Schnell is going to break under that pressure. And I see that happening here. I believe that what's going to play out here is that Brandon Royval is going to close the distance. He's going to work hard to close the distance. He's going to make Matt Schnell make mistakes. And that's when Brandon Royval is going to make him pay. And what happens here is Brandon Royval has the volume that causes opponents fits. he flusters opponents to a point where they don't know how to react to all of the strikes that are coming from a multitude of directions. Schnell does have the ability to lock up submissions off of his back. I think at some point someone's going to get dropped here, and that's when something beautiful is going to happen. And I think that a finish is in play. And I'll be picking Brandon Royval here. I believe that he's not only the rightful favorite, but you also have to go back to the Alex Perez fights and see what we're actually dealing with here. And one other thing, Liam, I really need to make this point clear is that you watch the Tyson Nam fight, and I'm going to ask you this, Liam, what did Matt Schnell have to worry about when he's fighting Tyson Nam?
Big power.
Right. What does he have to worry about when he's fighting Brandon Royval?
Overwhelming volume.
Right. And also, we know that if this fight hits the mat, this is a fight where scrambles are going to happen, and someone might get caught with something. So I'm going to be picking Brandon Royval. I think that he has a real shot at finishing this fight, and that line creeping down into the minus 220s is something to look at. I have I believe my hit rate all time on flyweight fights is 79%. So I have a knack for these calls, but there are no certainties in this game, right, Liam?
But absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Please finish.
I'm gonna be picking Brandon Royval in this spot. I just want to make that clear.
I love it. I was going to say, my man Tim beat me to the punch. Royval KO plus 460. I just looked to the best fight odds market because I kind of assumed, based on the inside the distance being priced at plus 100, even money, that, the KO would be plus 250, plus 200, plus 460 on the KO line against somebody with a chin like Matt Schnell. I think that's certainly very interesting. I know that we saw Royval pursue the guillotine when he hurt Kai Kara France, but if you have somebody hurt and they've got good jiu-jitsu like Matt Schnell and a bad chin, why wouldn't you just keep hammer fisting them or whatever you could to finish the fight? I think that, especially if he's fighting smart here, that's a good look. So I'm probably gonna take a small poke on that because I liked your read on the fight and you have a lot more conviction than I do, and I think that prop is mispriced either way. So I'll probably be getting involved on some Royval KO.
All right. One other last thing I wanted to mention. I heard Daniel Cormier say that Fortis MMA, where Schnell trains out of, they've had 14 fighters come on the Contender Series and make it all the way to the UFC. And also, the Factory X trained Brandon Royval as somebody who fights at altitude, someone who has great cardio, somebody who can go deep into fights. So just something to consider. I realize it's a flyweight fight, but also those punches come at you in bunches at that weight class. So as a referee, I would think when you see 10 or 12 strikes landing, you may have a tendency to step in and stop that fight.
Absolutely. Especially with somebody like Schnell, who tends to freeze in place, fall face first, to kind of like telltale signs.
Pantoja lost. Yeah. Oh, and we haven't seen him compete at 125 pounds in quite some time. He's faltered in multiple spots. Anyway, I know we spent a great deal of time on that specific matchup, but hopefully our viewers enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And I had Perez by KO in that last booking. So maybe this is my revenge spot here. I'll have to back my boy Royval by KO instead. But with that being said, we can move to a fight at 145 pounds. Storm and Norma coming off a nice casher for me in the underdog position against the Aspen Lad. I think that this is an interesting fight because we're seeing Macy move up in weight here. So potentially the weight cutting issues that have availed her in the past will be alleviated here. But I also don't think she's all that good at fighting. I think that might be part of what's held her back as well. I think Raquel Pennington has finished 3 people in like a 20-fight UFC career, and this is one of them. So, I bet Norma to win inside the distance in her last fight for a small bet. She didn't really give me a chance there, not a ton of volume. So for me, that was what motivated me to lay off this fight and just let it go by. I think this is her first time being priced as a favorite so far in the UFC. So, I think people are starting to come around to respect Norma. But yeah, it's just, for me, it's not a fight that I took a big investment in. Mike, how do you feel about this one?
Another Fortis MMA fighter here with Macy Chisoni. And interesting how she missed weight against Raquel Pennington, right? Came in at almost 148 plus pounds. And she's one of those fighters who hasn't necessarily improved throughout her entire UFC career. I've been watching from the jump and haven't been impressed with Chisoni. Norma Dumont, unfortunately, she's caught between weight classes. I really think it would do her well to fight at bantamweight, but she's cutting a lot of weight, and some of those last few pounds seem to be really tough to cut. We almost got to see Dumont against Blanchfield, right? That almost took place. In this spot, Dumont is going to be my pick. Chisoni's one of the greatest gifts she has is her physicality. She's very lanky. She's got long reach. She can throw for power. But other than that, her game has fallen apart as far as takedown defense goes, as far as being a fish out of water on the ground. That Lena Landsberg fight, my God, that was a reality check there. And I haven't seen her really turn the corner since then. So I'll be picking Dumont, but not much conviction in that play. I just not much interest in this fight.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, because you look
back but other better spots on this card as far as I'm concerned, Liam.
100% with 15 fights. And, you look at the Macy Chisoni side, and she beat, Gina Mazzani, Sarah Morass, Shanna Young, an ancient version of Marion Renault. The wins just don't leave, a lot of inspiration there. Her best win came in 2018 over Penny Kianzad. So it's like, it's almost been a regression from her. You talked about her not improving. I would even think she's almost gotten worse in terms of the overall form we've seen. So maybe we see a little bit of a return to form now that she's not going to be cutting weight. We have seen people underperform with extreme weight cutting in the past, but I think that Norma has a path to wrestling her here and also could hit her with big shots on the feet. Big reach advantage, big height advantage. Those are the things that just keep me off the fight entirely.
Don't sweat on that Sanda skill set.
There you go. I love it. And with that being said, we've got a fight that I'm not very passionate about at the 170-pound class. Francisco Trinaldo continues to keep a UFC roster spot by a thread. He's a great fighter, but he's just approaching that age where, how could I back him with any conviction in the UFC? The trapdoor is waiting for him. Eventually, he's been hurt and rocked in some of these fights. Granted, Jai Herbert has proven he can hurt and rock anybody in the UFC. But I think that mostly when I look at this fight, I see a huge age gap, and I see a guy that normally I would think is just plain better. I would think Trinaldo's is a better fighter than Danny Roberts flat out based on their skills. But then I see one guy is probably past his prime substantially, and the other guy, his prime is, much closer, but he's not that good in my view. I think he's kind of a lower level UFC guy. So I would have to favor the plus money on Danny Roberts here from a theoretical standpoint, but I really just don't feel passionate in my read on this matchup. How do you feel, Mike?
Interesting. Oh, Trinaldo, he's been around for quite some time, still fights in a similar fashion to the same way he came into the UFC. So he hasn't really altered his game much. Can come out like a man on fire in many of his bouts, especially early, and then somehow, some way ends up making it across the finish line. And then we have maybe an outlier was the Alexander Hernandez fight, where both of the fighters ended up trying to counter-strike one another and stayed at distance. And we had that hometown cooking for Alexander Hernandez. But in this spot, Danny Roberts has a lot of the intangibles that could lead to a victory here. He's younger. He's got he's quicker. He is more athletic. He's the better range fighter at this stage in the game. Trinaldo he should be down at 155 pounds, but he just can't cut that weight anymore at 43 years old. let's be honest though. How old do you think he really is? That's my age. I'm 43, and I don't know, man. He seems like he's, I would say 55, 60, the way he moves. But hey, he competes like what's the right word here? He gives it his all every time out. He's a legitimate striker. You can't sweat on him. Uh, I'm going to be picking Danny Roberts, though. It's tough to trust his chin, though. I've seen him knocked out numerous times. And the Claudio Silva fight was another situation where, oh, you talk about red flags. He had that fight won and then just gave it away. It's disturbing. In this specific spot, I'm staying away, but I'm going to be picking very hesitantly Danny Roberts in this spot. I think that he has a lot of the tools and he has got the intangibles. Tough spot, though. Tough spot. I want to see weigh-ins, too. I want to see weigh-ins.
I'll never put it past Danny Roberts to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I couldn't agree with you more. That Claudio Silva fight, big red flag, but ultimately just got to side with youth for me in an age gap this big with somebody so old in a division like this at 170. Where the knockout rate's already, fairly high. And we're seeing, fighters over the age of 38 just much more likely to be knocked out. Trinaldo's kind of been on the ropes a couple times. He's got a striker here in front of him. His grappling has not been as potent at 170 pounds. I think there's some, reason for concern here on the Trinaldo side. But he is the more skilled fighter. So
right. It's hard to that Jai Herbert fight is hard to wipe out of my memory. I could see Danny Roberts getting sparked out like Jai Herbert. That would not surprise me one bit, to be honest.
Maybe the under is live here. I didn't actually see what it's priced, but it seems like both guys definitely have a path to a knockout here, and it might be a little unconventional to take. The under 2.5 rounds for this fight, I see priced at plus 152 at best market price on FanDuel. Fight doesn't go to decision at plus 122, so that's interesting. I'll take a look at that and investigate further. But either way, we've got a fight coming up next. The final prelim on the card here, the featured prelim, and Randy Brown, Rude Boy from New York, is going to be taking on Chaos Williams. And I got to be honest, I've let other people's opinions of Chaos Williams prevent me from making lots of money because, I keep thinking, man, this guy's pretty dangerous. He's a talented fighter, seems pretty durable, seems like he's got a little bit of wrestling, seems like he's got some pretty competent striking, good timing, and he's fast. So he's got big power. I think he makes good use of it, carries it a little bit as well. However, Randy Brown is going to be able to match some of his physical characteristics. He's going to be able to match him in the length department. I think he's got a slight reach advantage. Going to be able to match him in terms of height as well. So Randy's a pretty big guy at this welterweight class. Has been knocked out before, though, which I think is a big concern. Anybody who's been knocked out before fighting Chaos Williams, because this guy will separate you from consciousness. He's got big power. I think his ground and pound is serious too, if he's able to get on top. So I think that a lot of people are taking the shot on Randy Brown this week. I get it. He's a skilled guy. He's probably got some grappling upside here. But for me, I'm kind of waiting to see if I could get a plus money ticket on Chaos Williams. If so, I will fire in all likelihood. I like Chaos. I think he's a good fighter. And, I think there's just something about him that people don't like. I think there's something about his style, the fact that he has a little bit of concerning tape regionally, but I think the guy's just progressed rapidly. I think he gets better every fight. And I like to look into where these guys go and what they do a little bit, go to their Instagram, try and find, photos of them training, things like this. And I've seen Chaos Williams training with a lot of elite guys, Justin Gaethje, John Jones, like guys are bringing him in to get work. And I think that he's a talented kid with a bright future in the UFC. Unlike a lot of people I hear think he's a bum. So, hey, let's see how it goes. I like Chaos Williams here. And if not this fight, I think he's going to win plenty more fights in the UFC. How do you feel, Mike?
Yeah. Interesting spot. I mean, the power is the great equalizer, right? In this specific instance, you look at Randy Brown, what he's able to bring to the table. He's the more technical striker. He has the much better ground game. He's a better wrestler. He doesn't have the power punching, and also he doesn't have the chin. So in this specific spot, it's almost as if Randy Brown's going to have to thread a needle to get a victory here. He's going to have to avoid that big power punch from Chaos Williams, who, like you previously mentioned, is 28 years old, is rapidly improving. I mean, the Semmelsberger fight, we've seen how he's able to put fear in opponents, have them be evasive, and they're on the back foot. I don't think you're going to have too much success on the back foot when you have Chaos Williams coming at you, trying to corner you against the cage. I mean, the Razak Al Hassan knockout, that was extreme brutality on display. In this spot, though, I mean, I was at Randy Brown's fight against Matt Dwyer when he came into the UFC, and I know what Brown is capable of on the mat. It wouldn't surprise me to see Brown come out here and try to ground Chaos Williams. He could fight a fight at length and use his jab. We saw last time out against Gooden, he hurt his foot. That didn't stop him from sticking to the game plan. I'm going to be picking Randy Brown here. I think that Chaos Williams is going to have to find that knockout blow. Granted, it could happen, but this isn't a fighter that's washed in my eyes in Randy Brown. You look at the fights that he's lost, right? Granted, wasn't a great look to get sparked out by Nico Price like that, and also Vicente Luque. But the clinic he put on Warley Alves, the Barberena fight, you see what he's capable of, and he's a really good fighter, Randy Brown. It's just a matter. I mean, imagine if he didn't get knocked out in brutal fashion in those two fights, how things may have the trajectory of his career. Long fighter, great cardio. That's something that we didn't mention in this breakdown. Also, he's got a big cardio edge here. So a lot of the signs point to Randy Brown, but if Chaos Williams is going to win this fight, what's his knockout prop? Do you have that handy?
I will check right now, because shout out my man Tim. He said that even if you're on the other side here, Chaos KO is a good hedge. I'm seeing plus 190 best available on FanDuel.
Okay.
And the ITD is priced around plus 160 market wide.
Interesting. So, and you're getting basically evens if you go with the money line, right?
Yep. So it's fairly close, but I think, yeah, it's probably more likely Chaos wins inside the distance here than a decision. I do favor Randy Brown to win minutes here, but I would also say, I don't think Chaos has poor cardio by any means. I don't think it's exceptional. I think it's like par for the course, average for the division, but yeah, I don't think it's bad. I think he'll be able to keep pace. He has shown up in third rounds before in the UFC. So I think that's something to look out for. I also saw him regionally go 15 minutes hard at a decent pace. So he's not a bad fighter, but certainly this is going to be a step up and one of the bigger challenges of his career. So,
and one other thing, comparatively speaking, if you're comparing fighters to one another, has Chaos fought a fighter capable of the cardio that our buddy Randy Brown has been able to put together? I'm also interested. I mean, the New York wrestling, right? You have somebody here who you're fading.
Oh, I haven't faded him. That's the thing. I have not faded my man Randy Brown. I would want a plus money number to get involved, but yeah, I have been backpack boys, New York wrestling boys. These have been my targets, but
you witnessed
that
Alex
plus
Oliveira.
200.
You witnessed that. You witnessed that one-armed choke that that he got in on Oliveira, right?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. The guy is a stud, but
I think like you mentioned,
he's a Renzo Gracie guy too. I got to give credit. He's a Renzo Gracie guy. I mean, there's like 10 reasons I want to back this guy, but I am not going to continue to stand in front of Chaos Williams. I didn't end up betting on anybody in the Baeza fight, but I told like 5 of my friends, I'm like, I think this guy Chaos is going to knock out Baeza. And all my friends who are sharp guys, and I respect their opinion, were like, dude, I think that Chaos is going to get washed. Like, he's going to get beat up. It's going to look minus 400. And then of course he knocks him out and I'm sitting on the sidelines like, God, I knew it.
This is a great, you talk about the MMA betting seminars. This is a case where you have someone who doesn't pass the eye test, but they're still a decent fighter. And like Chaos Williams, he looks horrific in some of his fight footage, yet he's still able to land these bombs and he's able to get the knockout. And, it is what it is. So sometimes it isn't that pretty.
I hear you for sure. And I also think that that's what people look for is pretty, technical, things like that. And you'll hear that term all the time. I look for things that are effective. And that's what I'm at least trying to do. Chaos Williams, love him, hate him, or indifferent. He's been damn effective so far in his mixed martial arts. And that's what I'm looking for. Marcus Rogerio de Lima, same kind of deal. When he's on offense, he's very effective. So that's the kind of potential I'm betting into. But I know the downsides as well. Decisions are probably not going to favor some of these fighters. But that's why I'm looking for plus money to get involved. So with that being said, we can move to the main card here. Again, a fight that's hard for me to get a read on because our data set is extremely limited. We've got Joe Lozon. He's been out of the octagon for a while, coming off an extremely impressive victory. But talk about octagon jitters. JSP making his UFC debut in Boston against Joe Lozon, MMA legend, UFC legend, Boston legend. Huge, huge like crowd advantage. Just nothing going for him there. Gets ran over. That was kind of an outlier result. You look back at some of the other fights that Joe Lozon's been having, it's been, not very good. He's been getting beat up by even some of his age contemporaries, some older guys, the Gritzmakers of the world. So I think that Gritzmacher obviously put on a pretty decent showing against Puelles relative to what Clay Guida was able to offer last week. But, he's clearly showing signs of regression, showing a little bit of that age in the octagon, some of those MMA miles and years. He's had a couple surgeries as well. So for me, neither one of these guys is a super bankable commodity. But from a skills-based perspective, I think Joe Lozon, unless he's able to just swarm Cowboy early, because Cowboy, does tend to be a slow starter in his fights. Lozon tends to be a quick starter. That could be a dynamic that plays out in Lozon's favor. But I think the longer the fight goes, Cowboy has been going 15-minute fights. He has been still competitive. I think he went to a draw with Nico Price. I thought, obviously without point deductions, that's probably a Nico Price fight. But that being said, he's still making it the 15-minute distance with a guy who had enough power to put out Randy Browns of the world. It's like Nico Price has unorthodox power, and Cowboy was able to make it through that fight. So I don't think it's that Cowboy has zero durability left and he can't fight anybody. I just think he's a little bit older, a little bit more shot worn. I think his reaction time's a lot slower. So Lozon's not really a huge hitter. He's more of this ground and pound. He's more of I'll get on top of you and put you in a submission hold. I don't know that he's going to be able to do that to Cowboy. He's a pretty big guy. Cowboy's a decent enough wrestler. One of the things that he's improved as he's gotten older in his career is the fact that Cowboy gets on top of guys. He's got that nice outside stepping trip from the body lock, and he hits it on a lot of guys, even guys at 170. So back here at 155 against the Joe Lozons of the world, I think he might be able to take over down the stretch. I think he might be able to hit and hurt him. But am I laying minus 180 on Cowboy Cerrone on a 6-fight losing streak or 6-fight winless streak? I'm not as inclined to do that. I also think that, we'll see some rejuvenation potentially on the Joe Lozon side. He's been away from the game for a while, whereas Cowboy's been fairly active. I do think that's why he's being priced as the favorite. But I also think that could be to his detriment. But a little bit more time has passed here for Cowboy, a little bit more of that recovery for his own chin. So, here's to hoping the Legends put on a fun one, if nothing else. But this is not a fight I was as interested in targeting from a betting commodity standpoint. How do you feel, Mike?
Yeah, I think it's round one or bust for Lozon. You watch the progression of his career. He comes out of the gate hot, and 10-1 KO. The thing is, though, Lozon also has the ability to lock up a submission. He is a decent ground fighter as well. Both of these guys, this is one of those fights that we were talking about, how legends are made, and they've paid their dues. And in this spot, I see that did you listen to the pre-fight interviews here?
Cerrone, I have only heard Cerrone's pre-fight interview. I actually have not seen a Lozon one posted yet. I follow the UFC news and a few things like that, but I'm waiting to hear that as well.
MMA Junkie had some posted. I listened in on it. They both seem like they want this win real bad. The problem is, I think you watch Lozon fight and he falls off the rails after the first round. And I think that Cerrone should pour it on here, especially the second or third round. He's going to be the much more active fighter of the two, and he has been the much more active fighter of the two. Granted, he's been losing a lot of fights, but you look at the Nico Price fight, there have been others. He has at least shown up and can put on a pace here. So I'm going to be picking Cerrone, and I think that he wins this fight inside the distance. I don't see this one hitting the scorecards, to be honest.
I tend to agree with you, and so I might be looking. Oh yeah.
One other last thing, scar tissue. I think that needs to be mentioned here. That there is a lot of scar tissue on Joe Lozon's face, and he could get cut up real early here. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a doctor stoppage.
I agree. And I think that that's something that people often fail to consider, but it's another path to victory. And I think that that's critical, especially somebody this late in the game in Joe Lozon. He's been running an academy as well. So probably not like he's not receiving damage in these 2 years away as well. So good shout there. That being said, we can move to the next fight on the card here. Kind of the weird outlier on the main card. Throwback fight, rematch of a fight that happened once before. It's become a famous meme of him slipping on a skateboard. Unfortunately, hate to see that happen to a legend in Shogun Rua, but he has probably overstayed his welcome in the fight game. He's been around for a very long time, and he's been put in a lot of vulnerable positions, later in his career. I thought that he was right on the verge of being stopped by Tyson Pedro. And Tyson Pedro ended up getting hurt there, kind of checked out, found a way out of that fight. But that was, a give me, back to Shogun, where I feel like most people put him away in that position, given that opportunity. Then we see Paul Craig, show like the regression in his game, where he goes from, a pretty close competitive fight to a fight where Paul Craig absolutely runs through him, completely dominates him physically, and forces him to submit to strike. So I think that there's, for me, not very much to like here on the Shogun side. I think that OSP is probably going to win the fight. But again, I've seen a worse and worse product from OSP over time. I don't think he's performing optimally either, but I still think he has enough to knock out somebody like Shogun. I think he's a little bit more athletic. I think he's carried that into a later portion of his career. He's taken less damage. Granted, he does come from a football background, so some reason to be concerned there. But I think overall he's shown he could take better shots at this point in his career. And he's been fighting against a higher class of competition by and large. I think Paul Craig's very talented, but from a TKO perspective, he's not the guy who should be knocking you out and finishing you with strikes. So some causes for concern, I believe, on the Shogun side. Mike, how do you feel?
Yeah. Interesting spot here. You've got two folks who are at the end of their road. Shogun, in his pre-fight interview this week, said that he has one more fight after this. That will be his retirement fight after this one. So he's come out and said that he wants to have one. He doesn't care where it is, but he wants one more fight. So OSP, it's either OSP early or towards the end of the first round. I'm going to be picking Shogun turns it around and ends this fight via finish. I think that OSP is a front runner here, and you've seen the Volante fight. There have been many others where Shogun comes out and turns the tide, and when you least expect it. I know that Paul Craig, that leaves a bad taste in our mouths, but I have to side with Shogun here. I think that if the crowd's going to be behind him, he's going to have a lot of juice in the building. He's had some time off to rehab. I believe he hurt his elbow in the last bout, and it goes back to I remember watching the Pride events live back in Japan when we were when they were on pay-per-view, and then I was fortunate enough to attend Pride Fighting Championships, where I saw Mauricio Shogun Rua take on Alistair Overeem live in person, and I was able to meet Shogun at the Caesar's Palace buffet right after weigh-ins. Was able to chat with him for a little bit that night prior to his fight against Alistair Overeem. Pretty incredible moment. And I had a bet on Shogun that night back in 2007. And it just goes to show you, how many years he's been doing this? 20 years. Incredible. And he has one more in the tank. Hard for me to fade. Hard for me to fade Shogun in this spot. I have a ton of respect for what he's done, not only for the sport itself, but for Shooting Box also, the way Master Rafael Cordero and the crew back in the day. Amazing fighter. He looks shop worn, though. Let's be honest. He looks like he's done. But I think OSP, he's one of those front runners. I think that OSP is going to have some success early, and then he's going to fall off of a cliff. And then Shogun's going to come back, and the crowd's going to be end up giving a standing ovation. That's my take.
I love it. And that's why I'm staying away. The big juicy price on OSP isn't something I'm looking to lay here.
Yes.
If anything, I would be looking at an inside the distance, a fight doesn't go, something like that.
There's no shame in passing.
Exactly. And on a fight card like this, you got a ton of options. I already have some bets down on the undercard, so I have no problem moving it along to the next fight on the card here, which is, where we really start to get the meat and potatoes of this card. This is where we start to get to the fantastic fights. But this one is a little bit more of a disparity in odds, right? We've got wide odds here. Michael Chandler, significant favorite, about -400 market wide here, taking on Tony Ferguson. And this is a guy, it just shows how fast the fight game changes. He goes from a 12-fight win streak to now he's on a rough run, a couple losses in a row here, a couple dominant, victories he was on the wrong side of. And he's kind of been a building block for a few guys in this division now. So he's looking to stem the tide, keep his position here among the elite at 155. It's hard to do at his age, but at least he's got somebody who's closer to an age contemporary here in Michael Chandler. And with all that being said, I think that this is a little bit trickier than the price would entail. I do think that from a physicality standpoint, it's clear who's the more physical guy at this stage in their career. Michael Chandler far and away. And so when I first started thinking about this fight, it was obvious to me why all the money at like 150 or whatever it opened was one way Chandler until it got to a huge price. But that being said, there's sharp buyback coming in, I believe, on Tony Ferguson at the +350, the +325 type numbers. And the reason being is because Michael Chandler tends to slow down a little bit in fights that he doesn't win early. We've seen that in his recent fights. We've seen that in the UFC. We've seen that in Bellator. We've seen examples of him trying to lay and pray, hold on top of guys in their full closed guard. And, it's a little bit different when you're a jiu-jitsu savant, like a Charles Oliveira, like a Beneil Dariush, and you take these guys down and you're passing their guard and you're moving through dominant positions. That's a lot different than when you're in the guard of somebody like Tony Ferguson, who has been one of the more potent guard players, in recent UFC memory. I believe he won a split decision versus Danny Castillo off his back, like almost the entire fight off his back. He beat him up with elbows, cut him up and won a split there. There's other examples from his career. The Kevin Lee fight, he spends most of the fight on his back, busts him up with elbows, gets a submission finish. So I think that there's been examples of Tony winning fights from his back and providing, optimal resistance there. But I also think that physicality is a factor. Michael Chandler is probably the guy who's going to get on top in these wrestling scenarios because he's a lot stronger than Tony is, and he's got a lower center of gravity. But that being said, I think it's where you can extend Chandler in these, scramble scenarios that you could tire him out. You could potentially make it a fight where the pace is unsustainable for somebody who's got a lot of musculature, for somebody who tends to be a bit of a front runner, who's getting older themselves, who, their own opportunity, twilight towards a title shot might be dwindling here. So I think the questions about both guys' motivations are live, but the clearer path to future title shots and things like that is obviously Michael Chandler. And Tony Ferguson's been very vocal with his criticisms of the UFC this week, which doesn't bode well for his future opportunities within the company, let's say. So I think for all those reasons, Michael Chandler would be my favorite going into this fight, but I'm not interested in laying this price. And, I have given some small consideration to Tony Ferguson late round props, especially those sub prices late, because I think that Tony Ferguson, he's got really long arms. He's got gangly grappling. And if Chandler starts getting overextended and like trying to cut corners, getting lazy on takedown attempts, Tony is the kind of guy who will put you in a transition Darce or Anaconda and make you pay. And he's kind of shown me that he has an ability to switch from hold to hold to hold which is something I like to see from front headlock players. Guys like Chandler, they're so thick around the neck. They got big, wide shoulders. Any one of these moves is going to be really hard to pull off. But putting him through the series is exhausting for somebody big and muscular like that who's going to have to fight off chokes. So I think Tony is at least somewhat live here, but haven't gotten to the window with any plays. Mike, how do you feel?
Yeah. Oh, wouldn't it hurt like hell to see Tony knocked out on the octagon canvas? No one wants to see that. The beating he took against Justin Gaethje, tough as nails, did not tap against Oliveira and was put in some really compromising positions there. Dariush wasn't able to tap him. I'll tell you what, you talk about somebody having stuff in the basement. Tony Ferguson has stuff in the basement that he's trying to deal with. A lot of obviously animosity after tripping over the wire on the verge of a title shot, having the interim belt and everything that he went through. His skill set is still there. Granted, he's a little bit slower. He doesn't have the takedown defense. He doesn't have the real get-up game, but is Michael Chandler going to commit to a grappling heavy approach here? And I like how Ferguson can be long on the bottom and land some elbows. I would love to see Michael Chandler. He's a great guy, but I would love to see him chopped up by Tony Ferguson's elbows here. And on the feet in the second or third round, to see the tide turn. How about go watch that Cerrone fight, man? The way the tide was turning there, he was just getting going. Tony Ferguson, the Anthony Pettis fight, there have been others where his opponent basically hits a wall. And a glaring quote here that stuck out, and I could tell that Tony has done his homework in regards to this matchup. He said, "We got to battle his ego first. Come past that ego, he's going to break." Man, can you imagine the pop of that crowd if Tony's able to get Mike to blow his load early, and then what's going to happen? I don't know. I see Chandler being that explosive, fast twitch fighter who is going to come out, try and land that knockout blow. He says, "I'm going to either make a highlight or be made a highlight," right? And I'd love to see this fight get extended. I'd love to see Tony Ferguson win, but conventional wisdom would lead me to believe that Michael Chandler wins this fight inside the distance. I have no play on this fight. I think that it is a volatile fight. I see the writing on the wall that Mike Chandler has the potential to fade late, especially with the full crowd here in Phoenix. But give me Mike Chandler. Tough spot though. I'm going to be pulling for Tony Ferguson. I'm putting it out there.
Me too. And I think that it's just such a fascinating matchup. It really is. Like, I think it was well made by the UFC. I think that some people are writing it off a little bit too early. I'm interested to see if Tony can show a better product. I do think that he looks older, like he looks like a different version of himself. But I also think that, I agree with you that he sounds more serious in his interviews. I liked everything I heard from him. Broadly speaking, he said, what's important to me now is winning. That's all I care about is winning this fight and moving forward from there. And they're like, what's your plans? What's your future plans? And he's like, that's the only thing I get to keep private. I was like, I just like that about him. He's kind of an ornery son of a bitch. And I think that, his stick-to-itiveness could be what gets him a big comeback win this weekend. But with that being said, I'm going to be laying off that fight for now. If I end up making a play, it will probably be something on the underdog side. With that being said, we can move along to the co-main event of the evening. And as we do, I'm going to tell you guys, we got 40 people rocking with us live. Go ahead and put down a like on this video. Go ahead and get subscribed to my channel. I break down these fights each and every week for you guys. Try and bring on the best guest possible. My man Mike this week, excellent guest. So appreciate your guys' support. Thank you so much for everything that you guys do. But we got a strawweight title fight to break down. I think it's a fascinating matchup. It's a rematch, many years in the making. And Mike, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts here because I do have a bet on this one as well.
Yeah. Interesting spot where we have a rematch. Rose Namajunas comes in looking to cement her legacy as one of the greatest fighters of all time. That's That's her words, not mine, right? So interesting spot here. A little concerned about the takedown defense. I believe we've seen that the clear game plan here for Carla Esparza is going to be to grapple early and often, put that wrestling to work. And it's just a matter of, is she going to be able to take Rose out of there? I don't think that this is going to be a situation where she's going to be able to rinse and repeat for 5 consecutive rounds. I think that eventually may cost her to a point where she runs out of gas, and then Namajunas at the beginning of the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round starts lighting her up on the feet. I could see that happening here. I personally have no play on this fight, but I see a lot of sharps who have taken the side of Carla Esparza, and it would not surprise me to see Esparza hit the plus 200 mark. And if that does happen, I'll be taking a much closer look. But it's you look at the way this fight could potentially play out. Does Esparza have the tools on the feet to compete? And I don't think she necessarily does. I see a big hole in Esparza's game on the feet. But then Namajunas, I mean, this is somebody I've faded for years. I've faded Rose for years. Jessica Andrade multiple times. Weili Zhang. And I've made money on fading Rose Namajunas, even on her climb up. So no play on this specific fight. I think it could be lined closer than it is. I think that these odds are they're not outrageous yet. I think they will become outrageous when it hits plus 200. And I think it likely will hit plus 200 before fight time, to be honest. Even some people don't end up going and looking at rematches, and also glaring holes in a fighter's game. So if Esparza is able to take this fight to the mat, I think she has a legitimate shot at locking up a submission here. And it's just a matter of Trevor Whitman, has his influence translated? Has she secured those holes in her game? And the Weili Zhang fight wasn't very long ago, and there were glaring weaknesses there. So no play on the fight. I'm still up in the air on this. I haven't made a pick with conviction here. I'm leaning towards Rose, but I haven't made a play yet. How about you?
Yeah, so I did come in with a play here on the underdog. And the only thing I don't like is that there's a bunch of people on it with me. But I'll tell you what, it's very clear that there's a lot of money going the other way as well. So, I think this is what's called a sharp split. I also think that the public is heavily on the Rose side here. And the reason I assume that is because Rose is a very popular girl. She's got a huge following on social media. She's been a champion multiple times. She's been fighting at the upper echelon of the division. And in my opinion, the UFC has done the best they can to bury Carla Esparza, like as far as they possibly can in the mind of UFC fans. But truth be told, she's been chipping away at these top 10, top 15 ladies for a while now and picking up legitimate wins, and I kind of got trapped, on that Yan Xiaonan fight. I was thinking to myself, man, Yan Xiaonan, she shows a pretty good get-up game in the Claudia Gadelha fight. She shows the lowest, time spent on the ground per takedown attempt faced in the division. A bunch of things I like about it. So I end up taking the bait here, and she gets smashed. Never had a hope or a prayer or a chance of winning that fight. Got absolutely smushed like a bug. So I was like, man, Carla Esparza still got it, and she's getting more dangerous. Her passing is getting more sophisticated. I thought that was the cleanest performance of her career. And she said that she was going to be, looking to improve her finishing capabilities leading up to that fight. And I thought that she demonstrated the efficacy of her efforts. She really was able to put, result to her intentions. And I think
that are wide open too.
Exactly. And in this fight, what I see is that Rose Namajunas likes to strike, likes to kick often. As a puncher, she likes to throw some power. She likes to set down on 2 feet and throw. And I think that if she does either of those two things, it's going to give Esparza opportunities to take her down. And Weili Zhang, people have to remember, is a primary kickboxer, likes to do Muay Thai striking. And she learned how to wrestle, mostly in Arizona, like for a few months before that fight. Otherwise, she had, wherever she was training in China was her primary base for grappling. And it was okay. It was mostly based on her physical strength that she was able to dominate people in the grappling realm. She then had some struggles and worked on that as a primary game plan. She was able to secure 5 takedowns. Carla Esparza is a lifelong wrestler. We know that she could take Rose down. We've seen it. I don't have to guess, can she take her down? I know she could take her down. And we've seen that Carla can take down even girls that have shown better takedown defense, better reactions when taken down, like Marina Rodriguez, who I think has shown herself to be one of the threats in this division, one of the people that's responded okay to grappling and gotten better at it over time. The Cynthia Calvillo fight is a distant memory, seeing how she responded in the Mackenzie Dern fight, for example. So I think that we've seen improvements, broadly speaking, in the strawweight division, and Carla Esparza has been chipping away at those fighters. I think that this is a matchup the UFC was intentional about not booking with Rose because they like Rose, and she's been a good champion for them, marketable, willing to take these rematches and fights. But I think Carla Esparza has just earned her spot here. I think she's got a tough stylistic matchup for Rose, and I think that she could definitely finish this fight. So I've got Carla Esparza, and I've got her to win by submission, like my man Tim had mentioned. At plus 1,700, thought that was a decent look. And I also have some inside the distance at plus 800 here for Carla Esparza. So I think she can get a positional TKO. I think she can get a submission. I think she could dominate this fight and look like a hindsight massive favorite. I also think she could get hit. She could get hurt. She could get finished on the feet. She's a little bit slower than Rose, a little more reactive. Her defense isn't perfect, but I think the takedowns and her toughness and her grit could be enough to carry her through this fight. I think it should be lined a little bit closer. So willing to get involved with the dog.
Great to hear your take.
And with that being said, we can move along. We got a main event here in the lightweight division. Another Trevor Whitman fighter in Justin Gaethje will have his opportunity against Charles Oliveira do Bronx, one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. Straight up, love the guy. Always been a very fun fighter to watch. It's been excellent watching his rise through the division, been cashing several underdog tickets on him against the Tony Fergusons of the world, slipped up, bet on Michael Chandler in that fight. He ends up getting chin checked in round 2. But I had a round 1 ticket on Michael Chandler at plus 750, very nearly delivered me a huge winning night there. So close. And that was the last time that we saw Charles Oliveira as a favorite. This guy has been priced as an underdog even against Poirier, got back involved there, got involved on the inside the distance as well for Charles Oliveira, got involved on the submission props in those fights. This is a fight where I see, a little bit more resistance on the Justin Gaethje side, to be honest with you. I think that when I capped the Dustin Poirier fight, I kind of seen a few examples of Dustin Poirier get put in that, backpack scenario, face some adversity, especially on the ground later in fights, and start to make bad decisions, start to question himself, lose confidence, things like that. Justin Gaethje is kind of a shit-eating wild man. That's how I like to describe him. He's like, he's going to come forward. He's going to throw big bombs. He's reliable to be willing to take a punch and give a punch. And I think that in this fight, he's going to have to fight a smart game plan. But I like everything that he said about how he's going to approach the fight, which is he said, for the Khabib fight, it's the only fight in my career I planned on taking steps backwards, and I'm not doing that in this fight. I'm coming forwards. I'm going to be swinging. I'm going to be the one attacking. And I think that if he does that, he could put Charles Oliveira under a lot of pressure here. Charles tends to stand pretty upright. He's got a dangerous clinch game. He's got excellent knees to the body. He's got brutal elbows from all positions. He's a very long individual, so he can make those elbows and knees work as intercepting strikes as well. But then Justin Gaethje on the other side, he's got some of the tightest boxing in the division. You see this guy land shots. It sounds like he's hitting a heavy bag. The fight with Tony Ferguson is literally harrowing. If you're an MMA fan, it was in an empty arena, and it sounds like he's hitting a side of beef. Like, it's just absolutely shocking, the kind of violence that we're privy to in that fight. Tony Ferguson was willing to take a life-altering beating there and did. And he's never looked quite the same since. So I think this guy, Justin Gaethje, if you don't put it to him, if you can't break him, he's going to break you. That's kind of his style. He's going to come forward, get in your face. And a few times he was broken back, like somebody just was able to take the onslaught of punishment, the Eddie Alvarez's of the world, even the Dustin Poiriers of the world, but they paid a significant price. I think that those guys didn't look quite the same in subsequent bouts. They took a lot of damage. This guy will change your life. Justin Gaethje fights will change your life. Michael Johnson's never looked the same. Like there's just certain fighters that, you get in a fight with this guy and it's going to take a piece of your fighting career away from you. And that's what I expect this weekend. And both guys could lose a piece of their athletic prime from this fight. Both these guys, young, mid-30s, right at their, if not athletic prime, then the tail end of their athletic prime here. So should be a great fight, well-matched, highly skilled guys. But for me, I think that there may be some value on the underdog here because I think this is going to be an absolute firefight early. I think both guys could get hurt and get rocked. The difference is, Charles probably has a more reliable kill switch. If he is able to hurt you, he's able to lock up a sub. And as I always say, there's no tough guying a choke. You just go to sleep. So I think that there's some equity in a Charles Oliveira submission that means I could see why he'd be priced a slight favorite here. But this is an elite lightweight matchup for me. Those are some of the most highly volatile in all of MMA. I think that, a lot of people are expecting this to end very quickly. I think we could see a couple rounds of this play out. I think both these guys are tougher than shit. I'm not the guy who's going to tell you, Oliveira's a quitter and this and that. I'm just going to say it doesn't matter if you're a quitter if you get dropped in every fight. If you get dropped by somebody like Justin Gaethje, he's going to probably let you back up to the feet and try and drop you again. And that could put out somebody like Charles Oliveira, smarter finishing instincts, I think, from Michael Chandler, and he's the UFC champion somehow. So I think that there's reason to like the underdog here. There's reason to like the favorite. I've been betting this guy over and over nonstop on his rise up, but I think that there's times to get on the bus and get off. For me, this is the time to get off the Charles Oliveira bus, and that's what I'm going to do. I haven't decided if I'm going to get on the Justin Gaethje bus, but I will say that I will probably be passing on one of my favorite fighters here out of respect for the Justin Gaethje side. How do you feel, Mike?
All right. Well, Justin Gaethje, one of the things he said in the lead to this fight was, I create car crashes. If he wants a car crash, that's what's going to happen, right? Now, my question is, can Charles Oliveira win this fight without landing or absorbing a strike? He could. That wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me one bit to see Charles Oliveira take Gaethje's back and sub him out before Gaethje ends up landing a punch. And then he would avoid that life-altering beating. Does he want to go into the fire where we've seen, you want to talk about somebody being on Queer Street? Justin Gaethje is on Queer Street in just about every fight. Mike Chandler had him on the ropes 4 or 5 times. He has trouble. Now, Chandler was throwing hooks, was throwing everything he had into these punches, these knees, every strike he had. Gaethje has problems when people throw straight punches at him too. You watch the Poirier fight. That was something that caused him fits. Gaethje, I know he's improved his boxing, but he primarily throws hooks and uppercuts and looks to close distance. I hear you as far as the not wanting to take a step backwards. I also look at who he's beaten and how he's won, and I don't think we're going to see Charles Oliveira backing up in a similar fashion to Edson Barbosa. The way Gaethje was like lunging across the cage at him, catching him, as Barbosa was kind of like a gazelle in retreat mode. I don't think that's going to happen here. I think that what will likely take place is we're going to see, let's be honest, this fight could play out a multitude of different ways. And that has me, I'm not going to say confused, but I'm being lured into a few different spots here. The first obvious spot is Oliveira inside the distance plus 100. That to me is a little bit shocking to see him at dog odds to win inside the distance. And then is Oliveira going to try to stay at distance, landing these straight shots, which Gaethje we know has trouble with. He has trouble fighting at range. We know the kicks are in play, the front kicks. but I don't trust the durability of Oliveira. I think it may take just one strike to the body. One heavy body strike could potentially hurt Oliveira. Now, we've seen that Timur fight. That changed the complexion of his entire career. He had a choice to make when he got poked in the eye, and he chose to meet fire with fire. And we've seen a different Charles Oliveira since that moment. The Paul Felder fight, this is somebody who's on a 10-fight winning streak right now. I don't feel confident on a Gaethje with a Gaethje ticket in this spot. I think that there's a real possibility that he gets submitted here in any position on the mat. If he follows Charles to the mat, oh my gosh, there's a multitude of submissions at play here. I'd rather play. I like the under 2.5 line. That's something that that's out there. Fight doesn't go the distance. I personally would line that somewhere around -900 or so. The way the damage that could potentially be inflicted. Now, Gaethje's coming out to I believe his grandfather's favorite Mexican song. The Phoenix crowd is going to be on fire there. No pun intended. I expect this to come down to, if it makes it into the third round, we're going to see durability come into play. Now, if Gaethje comes out and starts kicking Oliveira's legs, that could alter things dramatically right off the bat. But he's going to have straight punches coming down the pike. And I'm curious to see what Gaethje's going to do if he has Oliveira on the back. It's been a long time, Liam, since we've seen a fighter try to spike their opponent on their head when they're backpacked. It would not surprise me to see Gaethje attempt something like that to get out of that position. But I have to lean towards the champion, Charles Oliveira, to win this fight via submission. I think that there's a massive discrepancy in skill set. I know that Gaethje has the wrestling and he has the power punching, but as far as on the ground, as far as submission defense goes, I don't think it's even remotely close to where it needs to be to stop somebody like Charles Oliveira. That's my personal take. I don't have a play on a specific winner of the fight, but I'm going to be picking Oliveira.
I think that makes perfect sense. In terms of levels on the ground, it's clear. Justin Gaethje is not a guy who's training his jiu-jitsu every day. He's not a guy who's going to be caught in many photographs in the gi, let's say, right? This is a guy who is training for MMA. That's it. He's trying to win fights. And I think that what we have seen is that he's put a little bit more of an emphasis on his wrestling for this camp because that's what he needs to do. He needs to keep his layers. Yes.
His striking defense is atrocious. That's something that also needs to be brought up. It's what makes him who he is. He's willing to take his opponent's best shots, let them empty their tank, and then he comes on. And we've seen it so many different times, but he doesn't care about moving his head. We've seen minimal improvements. Tony almost had him out of there early in one of the fights if he was able to, if he had more time at the end of the round. I don't trust. If it's a war of attrition and Charles didn't have the opportunity to choke or have a calf slicer, there's so many different things that are in play here. It wouldn't surprise me to see Oliveira start chaining submissions together and totally befuddle Gaethje on the mat after he has him dropped. But man, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this match. The violence factor could be through the roof, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Gaethje end up choked unconscious here. The crowd may become a real factor, though, and we've seen the durability of Charles Oliveira in play. You can't really trust his durability despite that fight against Dustin Poirier. Hell of a matchup, though. Really looking forward to this card.
Absolutely. Me too. Want to shout out my man, Tim. Had a question in the chat. Justin been finished in 3 of 3 losses, KO'd twice. Why is he considered durable? Well, I actually have an answer for that. He's only been knocked down by 0.2% of the strikes that have ever hit him. Because like Mike mentioned, he puts himself on the line. Yeah, and he talks about, for his style, that he has probably 4 or 5 fights left. because he puts himself in a really compromised position, and he likes to be a fan favorite. I can actually speak to, as a wrestler, I always felt a urge, a desire, obligation to put on a show. I told people to come watch. I tried to recruit people to come watch my wrestling matches. So as far as I was concerned, I was going for headlocks. I was going for pinfalls. I was going for slams. I needed to do something to make it worth their time. And that's how Justin Gaethje for a long time approached his fights. And he actually recognized, he had some self-awareness. He said, listen, I've been doing this, but that was for fun. And I was having a great time, but now I'm losing fights and it's putting me further away from my goal, which is to be a UFC champion. So I need to change whatever I need to change to be a champion. And he has largely done a lot of that. And I think that the Chandler fight was kind of a regression to the mean. He went back to his old ways. He said, I'm going to go out there, put on a war with this guy. We're going to fight like gladiators. But I also feel like despite the fact he was hurt, despite the fact he was rocked, he felt like from a cardio perspective, there's no way this guy's going to put me down and put me out. He has pretty damn reliable to not get shut off in fights. Even the fights he lost, he got put down by being insanely tough and taking like truckloads of beatings. Whereas I don't think we've necessarily seen that from Charles. Like Charles was able to outlast a couple of guys that, broke under pressure, that were definitely afraid of what would happen if they got in the grappling with him. Justin Gaethje has almost like stupid confidence. Like he has talked about the fact that he considers his wrestling, his scrambling, very high level. He does not think this guy's going to be able to easily get a hold of him. And I have looked back at the wrestling. A lot of the wrestling from Oliveira hasn't been met with great resistance. Mike Chandler went for a guillotine, for Christ's sakes. I thought that was one of the weirdest decisions you'll ever see. What were you saying?
Christos Giagos, that fight had some wrestling in it. There've been a number of spots there, but something that stuck out to me also is I tweeted this out earlier. A versatile fighter has the ability to pose many threats to his opponent. So what does Charles Oliveira have to worry about?
Low kicks, hooks, uppercuts, and potentially, like you mentioned, getting slammed. I do think that Gaethje is very physical, and if they get into clinch exchanges, somebody who's really tall and upright like Charles could get picked up and slammed by somebody with a wrestling background like Gaethje in a way that compromises him. But I think if Gaethje's smart, he's disengaging there.
Right. Now, what does Justin Gaethje have to worry about?
The chokes, the knees, the elbows, the punches. He's definitely got more threats. Charles has more threats, but I do think he's a little bit more breakable. I do believe that. And I think he's a stud. Like that's the other thing is like, I think he's an absolute gangster, but I do think that among competing sets of wills, I've seen this guy, Justin Gaethje, go to extremely dark places to get the win. Whereas Charles has been flash knocked down in round 1, came back in round 2. That's impressive. That's not really the same as like going to death's door with somebody multiple times. He's done it in World Series of Fighting, UFC multiple times. Gaethje's willing to go there with anybody.
Only one last thing. The submission threat was never really there to this level in any of his fights.
And that's, I think, going to be an
X factor. If Oliveira is here, if he's able to, that's the thing. How is he going to be able to find the back? That's the other thing, because Gaethje's going to be pouring it on in front of him. And I think, man, there's a multitude of ways this fight could play out, but I don't see this one going the distance. And I'm looking forward to it. I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to sleep tonight, man. I'm so jacked up for this fight. Saturday cannot get here soon enough, Liam.
I'm right there with you. We got a hell of a damn card. We had a great group of people in the chat here to break it down with us. Shout out to all you guys who left comments. Appreciate each and every one of you. And Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to break down these fights with you. I think we did a great job for the people. I think we both gave out some winners, some good rationales for why you could get on either side. Some takes we were more confident than others. So obviously take that accordingly. If I'm lukewarm on a matchup, don't come back to me next week. Oh, Liam, this guy didn't come through. Not every matchup you're going to have a clear read on, but the ones that I did have a clear read on, I fired. I got some bets down. So I'm really excited about this card. Think that there's a lot of potential and really appreciate you coming through. So wanted to say, Mike, anywhere that you want to direct the people, anything that you have to say to get off your chest, appreciate you coming on and thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Liam. Really looking forward to the future, the years ahead that we have. Remember, third-party track your plays. Transparency is the key. Tail long-term winners. And also on Saturday morning, fight morning after the weigh-ins, I will be putting a morning breakdown show out on the MMA Oddsbreaker channel. Look for me to share my takes on all the plays. And with Liam here, I know we haven't made it to weigh-ins yet, but these are my thoughts on the fight as we head throughout fight week. We've had quite some time to prepare for these matchups, and it all goes down on Saturday night in Phoenix, the Valley of the Sun. Go Devils.
Absolutely. Can't get any better. I'm hoping that it's underdog season. The average distribution is about 9 favorites and 3 underdogs on a typical UFC event. I think we might exceed that a little bit from an underdog perspective this week. Certainly hoping so based on my betting strategy. But guys, wanted to mention, if you're interested in more of what Mike has to say, his YouTube channel is linked below. Tons of great tips, great information that you can get there about being a better bettor. I think it's really smart information. So all stuff that I find personally valuable. In addition, you could find his third-party track betting record. You could find mine. You could find a ton of information in that description box below. So any other questions you have, if you're looking to find him anywhere, please go ahead and find him in the description. And with that being said, thank you guys all so much. It's been another great episode of Liam Picks Fights. God bless you all. Good luck on all your bets. Good luck. I hope you enjoy these fights. And until next time, come back next week. We're going to have all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.